What would you do if the man who once looked at you like you were his entire world, looked at you one day and felt nothing? For months in a coma, a husband who doesn't recognize his own wife, and one woman's unbreakable love refusing to let go. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story. And drop a comment below. Have you ever discovered a life-changing secret about your family? Let's hear your stories. This is the true story of Hannah and Harrison Norton. A love built in sunlight, shattered in silence, and tested in ways most hearts would never survive. Stay with me, because their story will wreck you, restore you, and make you believe that real love never truly forgets. The late afternoon light of Manhattan poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Norton Tower like liquid amber, gilding everything it touched, the marble floors, the city skyline, and the man standing at the center of it all. Harrison Norton straightened his ivory jacket, checked his cufflinks once, then twice, a habit Hannah had teased him about since the very first time she watched him dress for a gala and spend more time on his sleeves than his speech. She was leaning against the doorframe of their penthouse bedroom, arms folded, one brow raised, wearing that expression he could never quite resist, equal parts amusement and adoration. "You've adjusted those cufflinks 4 times, she said, her voice warm with laughter. Harrison glanced over his shoulder, and the slow smile that crossed his face was the same one he'd been giving her since they were 23, the kind that said, "You're the only person in this room, in this city, in any room I'll ever walk into." "I'm being thorough," he said. "You're being Harrison." He crossed the room in 3 strides, and without a word, he did what he always did, reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair gently behind her ear. His thumb brushed her cheek. Hannah closed her eyes for just a moment, the way you do when something feels so good you need to press it into your memory. "There," he murmured. "Perfect. You say that every time." "Because it's true every time." She straightened his tie, also a ritual, also unnecessary, also everything. Harrison Norton ran a real estate empire that stretched across 3 continents. His name was on buildings in Dubai, London, and Chicago. Boardrooms stilled when he walked in. Markets moved when he spoke. And yet here, in the quiet gold of their penthouse above the Manhattan skyline, he was simply hers, the boy who had once driven 2 hours in a rainstorm just to bring her soup when she was sick, who still left handwritten notes on her drafting table every morning before she woke up, who had cried, quietly, privately, magnificently, when he first saw her walking toward him on their wedding day. Hannah's interior design firm, Norton House Studio, had just been commissioned to redesign the most celebrated hotel in the Maldives. Her work had been featured in Architectural Digest twice in 3 years. Success was woven into the fabric of their lives, yes, but so was this. The tucking of hair. The adjusting of ties. The private language of 2 people who had chosen each other so completely that the choosing had become second nature. They were synchronized the way only people who have truly seen each other can be. And that Tuesday evening, when Harrison walked back into his boardroom for the final presentation of a $40 billion merger, jacket pristine, cufflinks perfect, Hannah's lipstick still warm on his cheek, neither of them had the faintest idea it would be the last ordinary moment of the life they knew. What happens when the man who remembers every detail of his empire remembers nothing of his heart? That is where our story begins. Harrison Norton did not build his empire by accident. He built it the way he did everything, with patience, precision, and a quiet ferocity that made competitors underestimate him right up until the moment they couldn't. At 41, he controlled Norton Global Properties, a real estate conglomerate with developments on 5 continents, a private equity arm managing $12 billion in assets, and a reputation in boardrooms from Manhattan to Dubai as the man who never lost a deal he truly wanted. But Hannah knew something those boardrooms never would. Every Sunday morning, without exception, Harrison Norton woke before the city did. He made coffee, 2 cups, hers with oat milk and 1 sugar, his black, and carried them both to the drafting table in the east corner of their penthouse, where Hannah's sketchbooks and fabric swatches and half-finished mood boards lived in what she called organized poetry and he called beautiful chaos. He would set her cup down carefully, pull a small notepad from the kitchen drawer, and write her a note. Nothing grand. Never a speech. Just something small and true, the way you laughed yesterday. The blue you picked for the Maldives lobby. You, always you. Then he would fold it beneath her favorite charcoal pencil and go back to his coffee. Hannah had kept every single one. She had designed their penthouse herself, 42 floors above Manhattan, a space that managed to feel like both a cathedral and a home. Warm stone floors. Arched windows that made the skyline feel like a painting hung just for them. A kitchen where they cooked badly and laughed loudly. A bedroom where the city lights came through the curtains like a second moon. She had poured herself into every room, and Harrison had walked through it the first time and gone very still, and then said, quietly, "It feels like you." She had taken that as the highest compliment of her career. This was what they had built, not just the empire, not just the firm, but this. The coffee and the notes and the tucked hair and the Sunday mornings suspended in amber light above a city that never stopped moving while they, together, were perfectly still. This was exactly what was at stake. And they did not know it yet. It happened at 6:47 in the evening. Later, Hannah would remember that she had been holding a swatch of ivory linen at the exact moment it happened, standing in her studio 3 blocks away, angling the fabric toward the last of the day's natural light, trying to decide if it was warm enough for the Maldives lobby ceiling. She would remember the specific quality of the silence before her phone rang. The way the city outside her window looked, ordinary, golden, indifferent. Inside Norton Tower, 42 floors up, Harrison was mid-sentence. The merger presentation had been flawless. 90 minutes of controlled brilliance, numbers, projections, architectural renderings that made the room lean forward in their chairs. Harrison stood at the head of the table, one hand resting on the surface, the other gesturing toward the final slide. His voice was steady. His mind was sharp. And then, between one word and the next, something shifted behind his eyes. He reached for the table's edge. He didn't reach it. The room erupted in the particular chaos that follows the collapse of a man no one believed could fall. Someone shouted. Someone else was already on the phone. His chief of staff, Marcus, was on the floor beside him before the echo of the impact had finished moving through the room. Harrison's face was turned toward the window, toward the skyline Hannah had framed in their bedroom, toward the city they had built their life above, and his eyes were closed. Hannah's phone rang once. She dropped the linen. She didn't remember the elevator or the street or the cab. She remembered the automatic doors of Manhattan Presbyterian opening with a sound like an inhale, and the smell, that particular, devastating smell of antiseptic and fluorescent light that meant the world had changed. A doctor met her at the corridor. His mouth was moving. She caught fragments. Cerebral hemorrhage. Significant pressure. We've induced a coma. She found his hand beneath the tubes and the white hospital blanket and held it the way you hold something you are terrified of losing, carefully, completely, with your whole body leaning in. Outside, Manhattan carried on without them. Inside room for 12, Hannah Norton pulled her chair close, laced her fingers through her husband's, and began the longest wait of her life. For months. She did not let go. The doctors spoke to her in careful, measured tones, the kind reserved for people they were not sure could handle the truth delivered any faster. Significant neural trauma. Possible permanent cognitive impairment. They used words like uncertainty and prognosis and prepare yourself, and Hannah listened to every syllable with her hands folded in her lap and her spine perfectly straight, and then she went back to room 412 and told Harrison about the note he had left her the Sunday before he collapsed. The blue you picked for the Maldives lobby. She had found it that morning, tucked beneath her charcoal pencil as always, and she read it to him twice, once for him, once for herself. She talked to him every day. She told him about the merger his team had quietly closed in his absence, because she knew he would want to know. She described the way the light came through the hospital window at 3 in the afternoon, the specific angle of it, the color, because she was an interior designer and she noticed those things and she needed to give her mind something to do besides fracture. She replayed their memories like a woman who understood, instinctively, that love spoken aloud is love preserved. The pier at Willow Lake. Their first apartment with the broken radiator that clanged all winter. The way he had looked at her at the altar, like arriving, like finally. Diane came on the third week. Diane Cole had been Hannah's closest friend for 15 years, sharp, loyal, and constitutionally incapable of softening what she believed to be true. She sat across from Hannah in the hospital cafeteria, wrapped both hands around a paper cup, and said it plainly. "Han." The neurologist told Marcus there may be nothing left of who he was. "You need to start thinking about what comes after." Hannah looked at her for a long moment. "There is no after," she said quietly. "Not one I'm choosing." Diane's eyes filled. She reached across the table. Hannah let her take her hand, but her expression did not change, not closed, not hard, simply decided. The way Harrison looked before he walked into a room he intended to win. She went back upstairs. She picked up his hand. She kept talking. He woke on a Wednesday morning in the 4th month, between one heartbeat and the next, as though sleep had simply decided it was finished with him. Hannah was in the chair beside his bed, the chair she had effectively lived in, the one the night nurses had stopped asking her to leave, when his eyes opened. She was on her feet before the monitors had finished registering the change, her hand finding his, her breath caught somewhere between a sob and a prayer. Harrison looked at her. He looked at her for a long, careful moment, the way you look at a painting you recognize is beautiful but cannot place. Polite. Attentive. Entirely, devastatingly blank. "Hello," he said. His voice was hoarse from the tube, from the silence, from 4 months of absence. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" The world did not end. It simply went very quiet. Hannah had prepared herself for this possibility. She had read every article, spoken to every specialist, rehearsed her response in the mirror of the hospital bathroom at 2 in the morning. She was ready. And still, the 7 words rearranged something fundamental inside her chest, something she was not sure would ever sit straight again. "Yes," she said, and her voice was steadier than she deserved. "I'm Hannah. I'm your wife." He was discharged 3 weeks later, functional and sharp and disturbingly himself in every way except the one that mattered most. His intelligence was intact. His instincts were intact. He walked back into the penthouse she had designed for them and looked around with the quiet appreciation of a man checking into a very fine hotel. "It's beautiful," he said, and meant it, and had no idea he was standing inside the physical expression of her love for him. She showed him photographs. She cooked the meals he had once called his favorites, filling the kitchen with the smells of Sunday mornings he could not find. She played their song softly from the living room speaker one evening, watching his face for any flicker of recognition, any thread she could pull. He listened politely. He thanked her for dinner. He said goodnight from the doorway of the guest room he had quietly claimed as his own. Hannah stood at the kitchen counter long after his door closed, her hands pressed flat against the cold marble, breathing slowly. He was home. He was here. He was completely, heartbreakingly gone. It was 6 weeks after Harrison came home when Diane finally said the thing she had been holding back like water behind a cracking wall. Hannah had been describing her latest attempt, a Sunday morning, coffee made exactly as she always made it, his cup black and hers with oat milk and 1 sugar, set on the drafting table beside a sketchbook she had left open to a page he might recognize. She had watched him pick up the cup, drink it without comment, and flip the sketchbook closed to make room for his laptop. Diane set down her glass. "Hannah, listen to me. You are disappearing. I'm fine. You have lost 12 pounds. You are sleeping in the chair in the living room because you cannot bring yourself to sleep in that bed alone. You are staging your own home like a museum exhibit and waiting for a man who does not remember you to suddenly, what? Wake up? Choose you again? Diane's voice broke on the last word, which was the only thing that kept it from being cruel. This is not love anymore, Han. This is grief wearing love's clothing. It is love, Hannah said. Quiet. Absolute. He asked me yesterday if you two were siblings. The silence that followed was the worst kind, the kind with no bottom. I know what he remembers, Hannah said, and her voice was still steady, but something beneath it was fraying now, something Diane could hear. I know exactly what he lost. I was there for 4 months in that room telling him every story we ever had, and I will not accept that it meant nothing. That I mean nothing. He is still in there, Diane. I know he is. And I will not leave him alone in there just because it's hard. Just because it hurts. She stopped. Drew a breath. I made him a promise. I keep my promises. She did not know Harrison was in the hallway. He had come for a glass of water and stopped without understanding why, or stopped at the sound of her voice, at the particular texture of her pain, at something in the way she said I will not leave him alone in there that moved through him like a frequency he couldn't name. He didn't remember her. But standing in the dark of the hallway, his hand against the wall, Harrison Norton felt something shift, quiet, inexplicable, and impossible to ignore. She spent 3 days building it. She did not tell Harrison what she was planning. She simply asked him, quietly, if he would stay home on Saturday evening. There's something I'd like to show you, and he said yes in the careful, accommodating way he said yes to most things now, and she went to work. She was an interior designer. She understood, better than most, that spaces hold memory. That scent and light and texture speak to the body in ways that language cannot reach. She had built lobbies that made strangers feel welcomed and boardrooms that made men feel powerful and bedrooms that made exhausted people feel, at last, at rest. Now she built something she had never attempted before. She built a life. The entryway became the corner of West 24th and 9th Avenue on a rainy October night 11 years ago, where a woman with a ruined umbrella had stepped backward into a man who caught her without thinking and then couldn't seem to let go. She found the same cobblestone texture, the same amber streetlight warmth, a recording of rain soft against a window. She placed 2 umbrellas by the door, one intact, one deliberately, tenderly broken. The dining room became Estella, the small Italian restaurant on the Lower East Side where Harrison had taken her on their first date and ordered confidently in Italian and then quietly admitted to the waiter, when she was in the restroom, that he had memorized 3 sentences from a translation app. The waiter had found this so charming he'd told Hannah himself. She had loved Harrison for it ever since. Gardenias, her wedding flowers, filled the penthouse with their white, specific scent until the air itself felt like a vow. And then Hannah stood in the center of what she had made, in the dress she had worn on their 2nd anniversary because it was the one he had once said made her look like the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking, and she told him everything. Not to trigger him. Not to demand. Simply to show him, this is who we were. This is what we chose. This is the life that lives inside the silence you're carrying. She told him every chapter. Every ordinary miracle. She did not ask him to remember. She just refused to let him forget. He listened to all of it. He sat across from her at the candlelit table in the restaurant that was somehow also their home, and he listened the way he had been listening to her for weeks without knowing why her voice did what it did to him, settled something, steadied something, made the vast blankness inside him feel fractionally less like loss. She told him about the broken umbrella. He watched her hands move as she spoke, the specific, graceful way she used them when she was telling a story she loved, and something in the back of his mind stirred, unnameable, like a word on the edge of remembering. She told him about the Italian restaurant and the translation app, and the corner of her mouth lifted in that particular way, and the stirring became something sharper. She told him about their wedding day. About the gardenia she had pressed into his lapel at the altar. About the way he had looked at her like arriving, she said, like finally, and his hands, resting on the table, began to tremble. He didn't understand it. He pressed them flat against the linen and breathed and tried to locate the feeling, where it was coming from, what it was attached to, and then Hannah reached across the table and covered his hands with hers, and said his name, and something cracked open. Not slowly. All at once. Like a door that had been sealed for months swinging wide on a single hinge, images arriving not in sequence but in a flood, a cascade, a homecoming. The drafting table. The note beneath the pencil. The ivory jacket. The way she looked in the doorway watching him adjust his cufflinks with that expression, equal parts amusement and adoration, and he had crossed the room and tucked her hair behind her ear because that was what he always did, what he had always done, what his hands had always known before his mind caught up. He reached for her face. The gesture was so instinctive, so entirely and completely his, that Hannah went very still. "Hannah," he said. Not a question. Not a courtesy. Her name in his mouth the way it used to live there, like something precious, like something kept. She broke then, finally, completely, with relief so profound it had no sound. He held her face in both hands on their penthouse balcony, Manhattan burning gold 42 floors below, and he said the words he had said 5 years ago at an altar with gardenias and tears and his whole heart on offer. "Forever," he said. "I remember. Forever."